Hi, I'm Jesse Mengen.
I'm Rob Wypond, and this is a PsychForce Short. PsychForce Short. One of the biggest problems in our attempts to understand the impacts of involuntary psychiatric commitment is that practically no one is ever studying it and ever has studied it in terms of whether or not it's quote unquote effective and actually helping people in any way. Lots of people make claims, lots of people present their individual stories, and they often cut both ways, though. You'll hear people, many people, who've been traumatized by this experience and feel that it destroyed their lives. And there are sometimes people who will talk about experiences where they do feel that it helped them in some way. So what would be really good is to have more studies where we could actually sort of parse out the numbers and discuss it. And we have virtually none. And there's really no one in all of America that actually is even simply tracking outcomes. Just take any individual psychiatric hospital. Once a person has been incarcerated there, what happens to them? And then what happens afterwards? Do they have a better lifestyle? Do they feel better? Do they report feeling better? Do they get jobs? If they were homeless before, are they not homeless now? What's really happening? Nobody's even tracking that, except just this month, released from Pennsylvania, from Pittsburgh. They did a study here across, let me get these numbers right, 16,630 evaluations for involuntary hospitalization that were performed by 424 physicians at 14 different hospitals in the Pittsburgh area. And what did this study find? So they focused on a particular group of people that were what they found to be judgment call cases. So they followed these cases and they found that if a person kind of fell into this criteria, and this is an important group because if you talk about expanding involuntary commitment, these are the people you most likely are going to be incarcerating as opposed to letting go. So they found that if you did incarcerate these people, if you expanded who you were incarcerating, within 3 months, these people were more likely to kill themselves than people who had not been hospitalized. They were more likely to experience homelessness than people who had not been forcibly hospitalized. And they were more likely to be charged with a serious act of violence than people who had not been forcibly hospitalized. So this is definitively strong evidence, at least in this study from Pittsburgh, that's very current over the last 10 years, showing that if we expand involuntary commitment criteria, it will backfire on what people claim it's supposed to do, which is to reduce homelessness, to reduce violence, and to make people less suicidal. For people like us who might be really concerned and wanting to reduce or eliminate force altogether, it is really strong evidence for that argument. Do you agree with that, Jesse? And do you have any other thoughts on this?
I do. I think this study is incredibly important. I should qualify that it's the county that Pittsburgh is in, and that this subject is notoriously difficult to study. And so I think the truly innovative thing that they did was they looked at the data that was available. And I think you're making a fantastic point about the people being looked at, really focused on, are the policy relevant people, the people who theoretically are in a gray area about whether or not they should or shouldn't be hospitalized. And while I think a lot of data driven people, a lot of people who actually care about evidence base will respond to this, as a person who's been through involuntary hospitalizations, I've had far too many conversations with people who say, okay, fine, you were traumatized, but what about the one life that was saved at one point, which you can't actually, it's hard to prove that any life was actually saved by involuntary hospitalization. But I've spoken to far too many people who are willing to accept that a lot of people might be traumatized and harmed if maybe one life is saved. And so, as someone who's been written off as an acceptable loss in that process before, I think there are some minds that are never going to be changed by this. But there are people, especially with clinical culture the way it is, teaching clinicians to err on the side of hospitalization, to err on the side of caution. I think there are a significant amount of people who care about evidence enough to see this. And I think there are some really serious minded people who will be impacted by that.
Yeah, yeah. And you're not just collateral damage to me, Jesse. I
Thank
love
you.
you.
Thank you.
And I think, a couple other interesting things about this study that are worth mentioning. One is in particular is this incredibly wide range of ways in which psychiatrists were making these judgment calls. So they
Mhm.
found that certain psychiatrists, 100% of the people they evaluated, they would lock up. And in other cases, some psychiatrists, only 11% of the people. And we have to say that for this study, these people are randomly assigned to them in these
Mhm.
emergency rooms. So there was nothing like that playing into that. This is just an indication of the biases of certain psychiatrists over others and the incredible subjectivity of this process.
Yeah, I don't know how to respond to the idea that someone did it. They hospitalized 100% of the people evaluated. I don't know how you see that and not say, well, hold on.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to highlight, has this gotten much media attention? I've seen hardly any. I've seen a few people like myself who are bloggers and so on, who've written about it in some context or other, some minor media that have covered it, but none of the major news media outlets have covered this yet, even though this study strikes directly at the heart of the major policy discussions going on around the country around whether or not involuntary commitment criteria should be expanded.
That psychiatrists or those several psychiatrists are doing it 100% of the time. Someone taught them this is how we do it. And so the importance of something like this is to get it into the training process, to get someone to say, maybe we should rethink how we do it.
And maybe we should be more careful. That's what one of the biggest messages I want to send to clinicians,
Mhm.
psychiatrists from this study is just this is to highlight you should be very careful about locking anyone up in a psychiatric hospital because it can very easily and is even apparently more likely to backfire and to harm rather than help.
PsychForce short, short, PsychForce short, PsychForce